So, welcome to another episode of the Trailblazers Experience Podcast, the podcast where we have candid conversations with career trailblazers, change makers, and just about their stories. Today's guest is Shannon Watson, civic leader, speaker, and founder of Majority in the Middle. Not Malcolm in the Middle, the show, but Majority in the Middle. Her journey spans theater, psychology, politics, and public affairs. And she's built a career around bridging divides and empowering others to lead with empathy and purpose. We are not here to talk about politics. We're here to talk about Shannon, her pivots, her passions, and the lessons she's learned along the way. Shannon, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm excited for the conversation.
Let's really just start from the beginning. You've had an amazing career. You started out by studying English, theater, and psychology, which is not exactly the traditional path to politics. What drew you into this world?
Correct. So the English, theater, and psychology is about that's what I wound up with as an undergraduate degree. Those were 3 of the 5 majors that I'd had in school when I had no idea what I wanted to do. Hospitality management was one for a while. Secondary education was one for a while. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so undergrad took me 11 years, start to finish.
Wow.
I took a little bit of a break in the middle. But yeah, so by the time I went back to school and sat down with the counselor and said, I've got all these credits because I had all these different majors. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And she said, okay, here's where we can sort of plug in. And so I wound up with that triple major, which at the time, I had no idea what I was going to do with. I remember my dad looking at me at college graduation finally. And he said, what are you going to do with this? And I was like, I have no idea. But English, theater, and psychology does actually lend itself. Like it's a pretty good combination for politics. I keep telling people I have sort of a political science degree that has nothing to do with political science. It all has to do with people. And so, yeah, my first entry into electoral politics outside of high school student council and the honorary society I was part of in college was my mom ran for state senate. And so I went with her knocking on doors and talking to neighbors and putting literature on. And so that was kind of how I caught the bug. My parents were very politically aware. Both of my parents were in sort of very publicly and sort of politically adjacent roles. So my dad was in law enforcement. He was he started out as a rookie patrol cop and worked his way up, and then he was the chief of police. And my mom was a journalist. And so those are roles that are very visible and very, again, like sort of politically adjacent, very sort of civically minded, but yeah, that's kind of how I caught the bug.
That's so interesting because you could have actually said, oh my goodness, both my parents are in the public eye in a way, and it's, two people facing too much in the public media. I want to go completely different direction. When was the moment where you realized, okay, you want to make advocacy and leadership your life's work? Because going door to door is one thing, because I'm sure
Right.
Your mom also had some doors slammed saying, oh, we don't want to talk about this. When did you get that bug where you said, okay, I think there's a purpose for me here?
That's a really good question. I don't necessarily know that there was a moment. It was just something I really enjoyed doing. So I worked in retail for a long time. I worked in banking for a long time. And I did the political stuff sort of on the side. And then, but I think I realized, the sort of phrase that people say, find the job that you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I could tell you that is not true. You will work harder, and it will still be work. But the thing that sort of caught my attention was somebody one time said, if money wasn't an issue, what would you do with your time? And how do you spend, what is the thing that you do for free, quote unquote, for free? And so that was always the thing that I had done for free. And so I happened into a couple of roles sort of tangentially. I worked for the National Conference of State Legislatures in Denver, Colorado. And then I worked for the state Senate in Minnesota. And then I got into the lobbying and public affairs side, and that was sort of what I really enjoyed. Um, yeah, so that's kind of the path.
I love what you said about, if there was something that it's time, isn't it, that we're actually in essence complaining about when we're saying, oh,
Yes.
this job, this or this career, or it's the time element, isn't it? So the longer you're spending your time not enjoying what you're doing, that's already an indicator on the scale to either find something different or move on, because it's time that's the most valuable, not the monetary value, it's the time element.
Absolutely. And I'm sort of on this rampage lately that free stuff doesn't exist and free time doesn't actually exist either. I used to work with a lot of political candidates, particularly first time female candidates. And I found that one of the things that we didn't think about going into a campaign, beyond all of the other pieces where women have sort of hurdles to running for political office, the one thing that we really didn't think about was who would be filling sort of her role at home or at work or in community or all the other things when she was doing the campaign stuff. And the campaign stuff is everything from talking to donors to knocking on doors to being in parades to answering emails to learning about policy. All of those things, like, even if you think you have time, like you're always doing something else. And particularly when, women still do an oversized share of the home space work, that just assuming that a spouse could step in and do all of those things without resentment. And I will say, like, this applies for male candidates too. If you've got small children and your spouse, no matter how supportive they are, if they are on bath and bedtime duty by themselves every night of the week, they're gonna feel some resentment. And so one of the things that I figured out, like, amongst that process and watching people fail and watching people having frustration and that becoming a source of conflict in their relationship, was that, part of a successful campaign and a run for office is the team that you have around you. And that's not just, somebody writing social media copy. Sometimes it is grandma or a neighbor or somebody helping with bath and bedtime duty. So that's not all on your spouse.
Yeah, it's that they say your circle matters, isn't it? In your professional
Absolutely.
circle, but also your personal one, that allows you to be the best that you can be. That really resonated with me, of what you talk about. What are these non-negotiables and what are the things that you have to be comfortable with
Yeah.
giving up? So for example, I was never at school pickup, and I came to terms with that I couldn't be at school pickup because I was
Right.
working full time, and that was fine. But I made sure that, the Christmas play or the moments that mattered, I was definitely there. And it was the non-negotiables where I knew I could not be everything everywhere, but I was doing the best that I can as a parent raising kids. And it's the same, I guess, in leadership, is who are you delegating those personal and professional tasks to, who you've had the conversations with. It's a big one. But as women tend to find, majority of women struggle with that,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And we see doing it all and being it all as sort of this badge of honor.
And it doesn't exist.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't. My mother was great about saying, like, she used to say, you can have it all. You just can't have it all at the same time. And, that not being at the pickup, but being at the Christmas play, like, that also sets an example for your kids that it's okay. Like, mom can't be everywhere every time, but that's because she's doing other things as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you find, because I guess we're now delving into, challenges that women face.
Mm-hmm.
What are challenges that are unique to you that you've faced, in this journey, whether it was in politics or public affairs or the other sectors that you've worked in, and how have you overcome them? Because a lot of the time we see women saying, oh, we've achieved this and the accolades, but sharing the tips of, this was a really trying moment, and in hindsight, this is the lesson that I've learned. What was that for you?
There are a couple. The first one is I am definitely an introvert by nature. I have learned the theater part of my degree helped. I know how to turn it on and talk to people and be sort of outgoing. I found I'm much better if I have a role, like at just a party. I am uncomfortable. If I'm the party host, I have a job. And so, like, that's how I can interact with people. I also, working in politics, one of my biggest handicaps, I don't remember names, and not just names of people, but like names of streets. I can't give anybody directions anywhere because I'm like, okay, well, you go down that street, and then there's like a big white building, and
A
it'll
big
be on the,
landmark.
Right. I can't tell you what street it is, but I can tell you like it's a big white building. So me giving directions is an awful thing. That was one of the things I loved about the pandemic and all the Zoom calls was everybody's name is underneath their head. And so like I had that visual of here's the person's name. So like that was great. But I think one of the biggest ones was I was married for a few years, and I will say, like, my ex-husband is not like you ex-husband, he's not one of those ex-husbands. He is a wonderful, wonderful person, probably one of the best people I've ever known. And he and his wife and his kids are, infinitely lucky to have him in that role, in that space. Like the world works in mysterious ways. But I was very interested in nonprofits and government work and, sort of leading from behind the scenes kind of roles. And he's an engineer. And so he made, 3 times the money I made. And so I put his career first. And that meant we moved around kind of a lot. And every time I moved, I sort of had to start over with my network. I've lived in Minnesota for 15 years now, almost. And that's the longest time that I've lived anywhere in one place, one state, one city. Actually, I have 2 cities. But I had to reset my network every time I moved. And I had no idea at the beginning of my journey how disruptive that would be. Now, the good part is that between college and grad school and moving around, my network is all over the country, in some cases all over the world. And that's great, except your network, what's the saying? Your network is your net worth, and it matters a whole lot. So I feel like that was a lesson I didn't learn maybe appropriately or it's just sort of in hindsight. Man, where would I be if I had stayed in one place, or if I had elevated what I needed out of my career over just what accommodated his. And I will say, like, of all the people who pushed me to sort of take my career more seriously, he was one of those people. He absolutely would have stepped back had I been willing to do that. So those are, the areas of reflection that, if I could have done this differently.
There's some good lessons learned, isn't it? Because a lot of the time you are in the moment and, moving around, like you said, you're having to then reset, get to know people, do the dance again, go into tango. And sometimes there are no dots to connect. It was an experience for that chapter, and then you move on. And then sometimes a few years later, you bump into someone who, you had something meaningful those years back, and then it ties into whatever you're doing now. So it's ebbs and flows. I tend to find with networking. There's some people who are in your life for a season, a reason, or a lifetime, that kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. And I love what you said about relationships as well. Look, it's because I'm divorced, and it's the same thing. Is I'm perfectly sure that he is in the right relationship that it needs to be. We just weren't right for each other, but we have 2 amazing kids, and that's the most important thing coming out of that too.
Absolutely. And that's both of my sisters have children, but I don't. And that was never going to be a thing for me. I knew from a very early age that, auntie was who I wanted to be, but not mom. And I remember, like, on our 3rd date, we had a conversation. I said, I like you, but if you were looking for somebody to be married and have kids with, I'm not that person. And so, like, obviously something changed, and I don't remember exactly even what it was, but we did decide to get married. But he and his current wife, which I assume will be his forever wife, because I know them both, they have a little boy who wouldn't have existed in the world had our relationship, quote unquote, not worked out.
Yeah.
So I've very, right before my 40th birthday, man, this is personal. He's going to hear this. I'm sorry. Right before my 40th birthday, I was sort of struggling with, what have I done with my life? And I was divorced, and I was in sort of a dead end role, and I was doing all the things. And there was a picture of him on Facebook, asleep on the couch with the baby. And it was one of those moments that I saw it, and I was like, okay, this was not a failure. That everything happens for a reason. Had he and I not gotten divorced, that right there would not exist. And that right there is so important. So I just think, sometimes the way we classify relationships, like if a marriage doesn't last, till death do us part, that it was a failure. But,
Yeah, it's a
you
lot of
know,
classifying what does success look like, isn't it? We
right.
are in this world where there's this stereotype of what good should look like. And
Yes.
ultimately, everyone's trying their best. Everyone's navigating the way they are. And that was a phase in your life. And now here you are, with
Right.
majority in the middle and all the advocacy that you are doing for your community, etc. This is where the energy is now being focused on. So everything does happen for a reason as
It
as
does.
as well. Have you ever felt underestimated in certain rooms? Because I can imagine, in your sphere, in your area,
Mhm.
there are lots of moments. And I always want to give advice to young women or even older women who are still feeling that, little, ooh, I'm not in my comfort zone. How do they navigate them? Or are there some tips that you can give with that?
I think some of the underestimation that I have faced, I sort of did it to myself. So like I said, I worked in retail, I worked in banking, and then I was an executive assistant, administrative assistant, legislative assistant. I was always the person behind the person. And I really liked that role in that space. And I did have a mentor sit me down. This was a woman who was the head of government relations for US Bank. And she sat me down at one point and she said, okay, you we're approaching the time where you need to stop being somebody else's assistant and do this work because you're qualified for it. Like you're a great assistant, but you're a great assistant because you're wildly overqualified for it. And that was true. And being the person who made somebody else's life so much better and made them so much more productive, particularly if that person, I was before I was Deb's assistant, I was the assistant to the chief audit executive at US Bank, which, that's a big deal. He reports as CEO, $5 billion bank. And he had put on my performance evaluation that he was so much better at his job because I worked for him. Like that's enormously gratifying. It's not, hey, you met your sales numbers. It's really important person to the organization is better because of you. I like that was the kind of praise that I was looking for. I wasn't necessarily looking to be out front. But Deb was right that I wasn't. And so I put in notice. I left that role. I did 8 weeks notice. I was splitting my time between two executives. And leaving the one without an assistant was just not going to work. So I think that part of leaning into what you're good at and what you enjoy doing is one thing, which that was with sort of my assistant role. And I still do that. I mean, I do some PR work and stuff and, elevate other people. I love doing that. But if it is at the expense of you being the person and doing the thing, I think that can be something just, and it sometimes it's about ego,
Yeah, and
you
and
know?
I guess at that point in time, you were doing the best you could with your job, isn't it? In your role, and you thought this is excellent. And
Yeah,
it's interesting, because I have a friend as well who's an EA, and people forget that actually the executive assistants at that top level, they are putting presentations together. They are literally experts in a field and the right hand person
absolutely.
to the C-suite. So, it's not just answering calls and scheduling meetings and booking flights. There's a lot that goes into it. Sometimes reviewing documents, having conversations, interviewing, vetting. There's a lot that goes into it
Yes.
as well.
Connecting dots and dealing with relationships and
Yeah.
protecting their time.
Yeah,
Protecting an executive's time for the things that an executive needs to do. That is enormously important.
exactly. I mean, that's a very good tip, isn't it? Thank God for your mentor who shook you up and said, hey,
Yes.
girl, you are bigger than this.
Yes.
So you move on to, the career journey that you're on now, and you've advised candidates on both sides of the aisle as well. What's one lesson that you've learned? Because all we see as people who are watching, politics and people in politics is what we're seeing visually, what's being cascaded to us. Are there things that you've seen that have just shaped your own leadership style where you say, actually, these are really good traits that I now continue with in my own career?
I was talking to somebody about this the other day. Because I have relationships with people who are in the two major political parties in the United States, and because I don't, for the longest time, I used to say I don't fit on anybody's. I'm not on anybody's team. I'm not team red or team blue. I've shifted that, and I now say I'm on everybody's team because I think pretty much, this is just sort of me in the political sphere. I have some positions that line up with the left and some positions that line up with the right. And then a lot of sort of Venn diagram, put together, a lot of sort of overlap where there's a lot of us are that way. Very few people are actually just 100% this, this agenda, this party, this thing. And that the business of politics in the United States has a way of making us believe that, if you're blue, you're only blue, and you can't cross over because red is so different. And if you are red, then you can't cross over because blues think such different things and their lives are different and it's just different and you can't cross over. There's a lot of overlap in the Venn diagram. And so that's one of the things that I kind of lean into. I can find something to agree with almost anybody about. I can also find something to disagree with, but I generally like to take a little more positive approach. So yeah, I think the idea that nobody really actually kind of knows 100% of the things, nobody actually ever feels ready. Everybody is sensitive to attacks and criticism. And if they're not, if they say they're not, 99% of the time, they're lying. That 1% are sort of narcissists who you should probably stay away from.
It's interesting, isn't it? It just means we're ultimately just humans, isn't it, at the end of the day? And it's building that toolkit that allows you to function in your job, or whether it's public speaking, or whether it's in meetings, or whatever aspect of your career. It's what is sort of your toolbox? Because you do a lot of speaking as well.
I do.
And so you are in the public eye. What is your toolkit? Now that you know that actually a lot of them are faking it till they make it, what is your survival toolkit that helps you in a professional setting, in your speaking, in navigating your career? What are sort of the things that you're using at the moment?
Yeah, it's weird for an introvert to be comfortable with public speaking. That has never been something that
the juxtaposition there, isn't
right.
it? Yeah.
And at the same time, I am much more comfortable on a stage speaking to, I don't think I've been on a stage that's been 1,000 people, but like speaking to 1,000 people rather than speaking to one person. Like I'm much more comfortable like sort of with an audience because there's that separation there. Gosh, the toolkit. The thing that I still struggle with, and I have for a while, is this idea that people don't connect with brands. They don't really. They connect with people. And so sometimes we have this challenge of, saying, well, I'm speaking on behalf of my organization. I'm speaking on behalf of my company. People really listen to that because they want to know what I think and what this organization means sort of in the lens through whoever's in charge. And in this case, it's me. And so I used to sort of shy away from anything personal, anything, that wasn't polished and whatever. For instance, as we are recording this podcast, my dog is next to me and she has the most adorable little snore. It may be registering on this thing. I try to go out of my way. Like I use the headphones and I use the microphone, I turn things down, but she's snoring right here. And I could choose to be embarrassed by that and be like, oh, I have to lock her out of the room because otherwise it's not professional, whatever. Those kind of things, like your podcast getting interrupted by the dog snoring or the cat walking across the screen or the kids, asking how hot does the pan need to be for grilled cheese? My mom, she used to keep she and the women that she worked with, they kept a whiteboard in their office. And this was, of course, in the 1980s, things that the kids would call about.
During an important meeting.
Just during the workday, Bobby hit me to how hot does the pan need to be? Like, what number does the pan need to be on for grilled cheese?
Oh, where are my socks? I'm going out for sports. Where are they? Yeah.
Yes. Where is something? So it's just, it's those kind of things. So the perfectionist in me says, I want everything to be polished and perfect and look good and credible and all of those things. But it's actually, I think, in the human sort of flaws and things that we're all dealing with that do bring the credibility. Like, this is a real person. This is not fake. This is what my hair looks like today because it has decided to do that. Like, okay, we all deal with those things.
Do you know? And I think that's why podcasts resonate a lot with a lot of people. We're here, we're sitting. I'm in a suit and heels and we're casually dressed, don't have any makeup on, a bit of lip gloss. We're just authentically ourselves having a conversation. There is no hidden agenda. And I think that's what resonates now. And realizing that even in your own professional life, that just being yourself is that superpower, is that toolkit that you need to get you through the day as well. But I love what you say. I'm the opposite. So I'm better one-to-one. And then, because I've never done a keynote, like speaking by myself in front of 1,000 people, because I'm panicking. Everyone says I would be brilliant for it, but I think I just need to step out of my comfort zone and just do it, and just maybe imagine them as just like binary numbers.
There you go.
Instead, or something like that. I need to overcome that hurdle. Yeah.
I the most freaked out I have ever been doing a speech, and I do a lot of speeches, was I got the opportunity to do a TEDx talk. And the challenge was that TED has a lot of rules.
Oh, really?
They do. They have enormous amount of rules. They don't actually like you to use slides, and I use a lot of PowerPoint slides.
Okay.
Because I'm a very visual learner.
I see. So what do they want you to use? Like just images or stuff like that, or nothing at all?
They prefer nothing at all. They prefer the speaker just to be the focal point. But I use a lot of and you can't use notes. They do let some people use notes, some of the really big deal people. But like for that, you couldn't use notes. And so I had to memorize. And then of course they have a time limit.
Yes.
And so I, like I said, I got the opportunity to speak at this TEDx event, and the theme of the event was crossing the divides. And it turned out that after, I had submitted an application and got accepted, I was the only person who was not from that particular geographic area. And I had to go last. And
even worse.
Right?
Yeah.
My speech was the one that aligned closest to their the theme that they had come up with ahead of time. And so people were telling me, "Oh, you're the keynote." And I was like, no, good, in the middle. I mean, it was an event, but on, and I like the words just, and I have never been so panicked about it. And so I was just like, okay, I need to, I muddled through, and then I was like, I need to do this again. I need to do this again. And by the fourth time, like it was better. It was not anywhere close to ready for showtime. But the lighting guy who was sitting in the back of the room, I looked at him and I was like, okay, that was like better, but it wasn't better. And he said, it sounds to me like you're struggling with your words because you're trying to remember your memorized script.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And actually, what you need to remember is just the key points, isn't it? And just talk around it. Yeah.
He was like, just get up there and talk. And I'm like, I can talk about this stuff for an hour and a half. That's the problem, is that, I have to remember that it's 18 minutes and here's all the things I have to hit. And then here's the things I can't say because they, violate the TED rules. And then so a friend of mine who was also giving a TED talk that day, I said, because like there's 250 people in the audience, which is great. But the TED brand and the fact that this thing's going to live on the internet forever was so it was a huge opportunity and a huge responsibility. And what the two of us finally figured out was, if we bomb this, TED is not going to associate it with their brand. There's actually not it's not like being live streamed. It has to go.
It might not air at all. They'll just be like, yeah, we won't.
Right. At worst, I'm going to have to ask these 250 people in this civic auditorium to forgive a terrible presentation. It's not actually that was sort of my backstop. And that was great. I mean, I wound up rehearsing every second until I had to go on. And then I did, and it was fine. And I shouldn't do that. It was good. It was good. I got some applause. People thought it was very memorable, and it has led to some other opportunities. It did pass the TED brand. Okay. And so it does live out on the internet forever. But yeah, just let your sort of figure out what your worst possible scenario is.
Yeah. What's the worst that could happen?
Right.
Yeah.
If you get up and you do a speech, what's the worst thing that could happen? You bomb it. Okay. The people in that audience will forgive you. They will forgive you. It will be fine.
The viewers are now going to go and listen to the TED Talk.
I hope so. It's
It's
called
a
Why Are We
very good
Divided
way
and
of
What Can
saying,
You Do?
oh, listen to my TED Talk.
Listen to my
But
TED
I
Talk.
think, yeah, the backstory behind it. And one of the things that I've seen is with a lot of the professional speakers that are out there, so whether it's Stephen Bartlett or whoever, is I've noticed when you watch all the talks that they've done in this year or last year, there
Yeah.
was a common theme.
Mhm.
And there's probably a reason for that. They have the same message, same theme, which meant they didn't have to rehearse all the time. They had the same thread or messaging that they were carrying through depending on the audience as well. So I was like, oh, that's also a good thing to have. Say, what is it you're passionate about? What is it you're talking about that you can resonate and just regurgitate each
Right.
time? But yeah.
Yeah. The TEDx actually, it came from a speech that I did do a lot of Rotary clubs. Rotary clubs are great for speaking, and the mission of my organization dovetails well with their 4-point test. So I had sort of rehearsed it and done it like 30 times for Rotary clubs in Minnesota before I wound up doing it as a TED.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk about your organizations. What are sort of the milestones that you personally are most proud of? Because it's been running for a while.
Mhm.
You've had an interesting career journey, and it's sort of led you to this point. So on reflection, because we are talking about you, what have been some of the highlights where you think, you know what, I did that. I'm really proud of myself here.
Yeah. So we've been around. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. Been around since 2020. You mentioned like dots. Like you never know the dots that are going to connect. And I feel like when I put this organization together in 2020, like it seemed like it was new. It seemed like it came out of nowhere. But in looking back at my career and grad school and other things I'd written and sort of issues that I had done advocacy around, like all of those dots connected in hindsight. Like, oh, that makes sense. It's sort of in the same way that, how does English theater and psychology relate to politics? Well, it does. It's just, you don't know it at the moment. So we put it together, decided this is what we're going to do. We don't know how to solve things. I sort of leaned into in the last 5 years that people are going to need to hear from me. They just don't need to see the brand because, people don't trust the brand. So that's something I've learned. This sounds like a weird thing to be proud of. But so on June 14th, some legislators in Minnesota were shot and one of them was assassinated, which is somebody was telling me the first female political assassination in the United States. And so, yes, she and her husband were shot and killed, and another state senator and his wife were shot. They are recovering, thank God. But that was a Saturday morning, and I started getting phone calls and messages from people who said, your perspective and your voice is going to be really important, and so speak up. And I did. And part of it was it took 48 hours to catch the guy, 43 hours technically, but like 2 days to catch this guy. They got a hold of his vehicle and he had a list of legislators. And it turned out he had they caught him on security footage at another legislator's home. He had knocked on the door and she wasn't there. So she didn't answer the door. And another one, he was outside someone's home. And so part of it was part of the message that I tried to convey that day was like, everybody try to be as calm as you can. Don't jump to conclusions. Don't spread misinformation because there was a lot of fear and there was a lot of misinformation out there. Uh, and then out of that, a lot of people like, okay, what do we do? What do we do next? How do we do this? And I, spending 4 or 5 years talking about political division, I was like, okay, I can talk about political division all day long. I can do an 18-minute TED Talk. I can do an hour and a half. I can do it on a podcast. Political violence, on the other hand, was not something that I had a lot of experience in. Luckily, I do have a guy in my network who does. He has done a lot of work in other states in the United States and in other countries. And so, like, he was my first phone call. It's like, I can talk about division. I don't know how to talk about violence. And so he was like, okay, here's resources. Here's sort of a formula. And we did that. And then in the subsequent time, we put together this like whole initiative called What We Can Do Week, which was actually 17 days. So it wasn't like just a week. And it was time and space and attention and opportunity for people to come together and to start crossing divides and getting resources for learning about political violence and polarization and all of these things. And we'll be coming up on the end of those couple of weeks here in a couple of days. And we're still not quite sure what's going to happen with it because, 17 days, obviously we haven't fixed the problem, but just the, and like I said, like these are people I knew, these are people I work with. And so in doing and in helping others, that was the way for me to sort of deal, and being like, okay, yeah, I'm going to lean into this because this is something I know a lot about. And I know how to put a brand together and I know how to convene a table. And so I'm kind of proud of that. That sounds awful. And yeah, it just, I mean, if I could trade it, if I could trade for it and to not have happened and me not have had that opportunity, I absolutely would in a second.
I think what I'm listening to the story, and sorry for the losses as well, is it was your ability to bring people together, in a time of trouble. There was death, and they always say what usually brings people together and shows a measure of their personality and character is death, weddings, and funerals, weddings, and
Mhm.
births. And you were able to say, right, I know this is a true sign of leadership. This is not my expertise. Who can I call in to help shape this and make sure that we're on the right track? People were listening to and looking to you for how do we navigate this? And it was navigated in the right way. And I think that's a true testament, of true leadership. It's not actually when things are going well and when everything's perfect, but
Right.
actually in true adversity or turmoil or disaster, how do you react? How do you bring people together? How do you bring people to do the right thing and focus on
Yes.
what matters? So in a way, it's talking about connecting the dots. You talked about your father being in law enforcement, your mother being a journalist. I think the core ethics and values of your upbringing are now
Right.
coming back to human psychology. So all of that is now coming together to this moment. Who knew
Right.
of
Right.
of
Well, and
pulling
that's
it together?
I'm
Yeah.
I'm pretty good in a crisis, and it is primarily because of my parents doing the jobs that they do, and understanding that sometimes you got to just you got to take care of business, and then you cry. So that was kind of my coping mechanism too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they're looking down in memory, and if anything good can come out of this in terms of how to react, whatever, safety measures are being taken moving
Right.
forward as well because ultimately, politicians are people. They also have families. They also
Absolutely.
have, lives. So it's I know sometimes it's very hard to separate the two when they're pressing issues to be dealt with, but violence is never the answer. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's I don't think there's anybody who actually, at least in my sphere, who thinks that's okay. And we even brought people together. We created a civic pledge for a stronger Minnesota that was about denouncing violence and the rhetoric that leads up to it, and committing to doing the hard work of finding common ground. And we did have a bunch of people sign. We had like a signing ceremony signing this pledge, and then we've had people do it subsequently who couldn't make it to that particular event. And just that sort of common thread of we're going to disagree on a lot of stuff. Here's some very basic things that we can disagree on, to the point that like you look at it and you're like, well, duh, of course
Yeah.
we agree on this. But that was one of the things that
Everyone came together, isn't it? Yeah.
right, and that's an important step in moving past violence and not letting it be sort of the straw that broke the camel's back, or the match that lights the tinderbox or whatever, not making it worse. Um, Sometimes it's about just sort of countering our own sort of human instincts to gather into tribes and to divide and to find solace and safety in the people who are most similar to us. Like that's a part of the human condition. We do that naturally. And then understanding that this is a scenario where we're gonna do that. But what are the things that we can do to make sure that that isn't harmful and it isn't sort of the last place that we get to?
Yeah. In lots of cultures, or traditions worldwide, you see, they have in the tribes, there are elders men or elders women or
Mhm.
people who are the ones that bring the community, the tribes together. They're the ones that, before there is war, before there's adversity, that they're spoken to. They're the words of wisdom to
Yes.
guide. And I think in a similar vein, although, westernization is one thing, but the core ethics and values of those principles of cultures and tradition stay true as to what you were trying to do in that situation as well. Is how do we find a common ground? How do we come together? How do we mobilize and allocate? And what good can come out of this? What have we learned? How are our people doing? So it's definitely rooted in that for sure.
Yeah. And how do we reward the leaders who are brave enough to step up and, stand next to somebody that they disagree with for the good of what comes next? Because what's rewarded will continue. So when division is rewarded, that's what we get more of. Hopefully, if the coming together would be rewarded as well.
What excites you now most about the future? So in your personal, professional life, what's next? Because obviously you're doing a lot of things, have achieved some great things. Are there things that you're setting your eyes on that you want to talk about?
Yes. I feel like I have clarity of purpose after a very, very long time. I mean, I turned 50 earlier
Sorry
this
about
year.
that.
Well, that's okay. Um, so I turned 50 earlier this year, and in some ways that feels really old. In some ways, it doesn't feel old at all. I think me being 50 is different than like when my mom was 50. From my own perspective, like when my mom turned 50, like that was old. Now it's like that's not old. 65 is older. 70 is old. Like that's the thing. Like I'm to the
You're
point where
just getting started.
yeah, I hope so. And at the same time, like I I may be a little more conscious of using time wisely, because I won't be around forever. And like what is it that I wanna do and leave behind, and I've chosen to work in a field in a specific area uh where change is incremental if at all. So I tell people that I want to work myself. My ultimate goal is to work myself out of a job, to where we don't have to have a conversation about political polarization because it just won't be. All right, is that realistic? No, because again, like human beings divide just because we do. Um, and I do think like if we look at not just people but structures and systems, and how can we change our systems so that they support not even unity, like I need the word that's not unity, but it supports collaboration or cooperation or the sharing of power rather than division and hoarding of power, and or just if you're in power, you're in power. If you're in the minority, then you're not, and your role is to throw sand in the gears.
Well, the great thing is the upside is you're at halftime now, isn't it? It's like 50 years on this earth. Now you
Right.
can do whatever you want
There you go.
because you've got nothing to lose. So it's like there are no excuses now to push on with your agenda. And from everything that you've said, there is you're talking about collaboration,
Yeah.
core values, making sure that people are working together, finding common ground. The world is your oyster, and digital is a good way of doing it, isn't it? To spread as much of that good fact checked information, making sure people have resources. So I think it's the ball is in your court, really.
Yeah.
I always say, someone used to say to me all the time, which I think is always good advice, is going into a lot of board meetings or working with executives, and says, I said, what's the best way to navigate being in situations or positions where with other leaders, and say, what's the outcome you're trying to achieve with what you're about to say?
Yeah.
And if you think about the outcome, if you're happy with, what's going to happen, then fine. If you're not, then probably reserve it for a time where it's appropriate. But always in my mind, that's always like, okay, if I say this, what am I trying to achieve?
Right.
And I think it's a very good way of measuring and thinking before you speak as well. It's been one of those guiding principles now that I'm using more often as well.
Yeah. And it's funny. I was thinking about the visual of a boardroom and the leaders, and women sometimes struggle with, well, I want to be a leader. What does a leader look like? How does a leader act? What does a leader say? And I found with my own self, and this may not be the same for other people, But with my own self, the idea of, like when people were calling me that Saturday morning and saying, "Hey, your leadership is important on this." If I can reframe that as my contribution to this situation, to this conversation, to this issue, if it's my contribution instead of my leadership, both of those things can look exactly the same and just sort of take out the hierarchical assumption that, I need to be at the top. I need to have the answers. I need to, my contribution is saying these things. My contribution is also bringing Nathan into the conversation, bringing other people into the conversation, bringing, hosting the table and making space. Which I think is one of those things that, to go back to Deb and, you're somebody else's assistant. She never belittled my work at all. And I think it's only in having been the person. I haven't had an assistant yet. I would feel really bad for that person. I don't know if I sort of like, doctors make the worst patients. I think this is just
Because you're so
the
good,
worst.
you need an assistant who will challenge you, I think.
Right, right. And that's the thing.
Yeah.
I need a partner in the work. And so I think sometimes reframing those things, it takes the hierarchy out of it, that I'm the leader and you are the assistant. Or, how about if we all have contributions to make, that can also sort of give us permission to speak up in a way that, like, the bar is not so high to clear. Am I exhibiting leadership? Well, maybe not, but am I contributing my piece to this? That's a little easier to lean into, I think.
Shannon, we're coming to the end of the episode, and we always ask our guests to leave 3, if you can, Trailblazer takeaway tips, advice for our listeners to inspire, and, maybe it changes the way they think, helps them go in the right direction or make a career pivot. What would yours be?
I've got one for sure. I don't know if I have 3. I have one for sure. I had another mentor who, again, I am an introvert, and for years I thought that the best way to be influential or to, do well at work was to focus on the tasks, write the report, do the sales calls, have the meeting, put together the PowerPoint, those kind of tasks that you put on your to-do list. I did not spend a lot of time early in my career, like, quote unquote, wasting time talking to my coworkers about their weekends or TV shows or, doing coffee meetings or going to networking events. I still don't like going to a networking event unless I'm hosting. Um, but those networking events, those coffee meetings, conversations, even like the one that you and I are having here, those are the basis for relationships. And what I came to learn, and what I have a sticky note, is actually probably the 3rd one because it keeps falling off the wall because it gets old. I wrote on a sticky note one day, the relationships are the work. So the coffee meeting with a colleague or with an outside partner, getting to know somebody, that is not a waste of time or something that's getting in the way of me doing my to-do list. So relationships are the work. And so, like, leaning into that as part of my job, like, that has probably accelerated my work and, quote unquote, my career more than anything in the last, 10 years, leaning into network and people and that. And then, okay, so I suppose I have another one. So I've got relationships, other work. And then another brilliant woman told me one time, very few decisions are irreparable, which is awesome because it gives you permission to make a decision, even if it might be a mistake. Very few decisions are irreparable. There are some, but even big things, taking this job or moving to this city or saying yes for whatever, or saying no. Very few decisions are irreparable. that gives me some sort of like courage to make a decision and possibly be quote unquote wrong, had made the decision. Okay, you fix it. You take a job that turns out you're not a good fit for, but get a different job. It's not an issue. It's not a failure. Get divorced. It's okay.
What is it? I'd rather ask for forgiveness than ask for permission, because
Yeah.
what's the worst that can happen? It's all these things, isn't it? What we're encouraging women to do is to take that chance. Be agile. What's the worst that can happen? Take the opportunities, and also say no if you need to, as well. You don't lose anything by doing that too.
Yeah. There was a wonderful thing going around on social media several years ago. It was about one of the things about success is making sure your partner, whoever that is, and it's your partner in life, your spouse, your partner at work. If um, what does success mean to you? What does it look like to you, and what does it look like to them? And a lot of personal relationships that fail are often because the the individual's definition of success isn't the same, or it doesn't look the same, or it's not necessarily compatible.
That applies in everything, isn't it? If you're going for a
Absolutely.
job interview, what does success look to the company that you're going to? If you're starting a business, your business partner, what is their idea of success?
Yeah.
Your investor, what is their idea of success? There are all these things. It's having those conversations and articulating it, even if you have to write it down on a piece of paper and compare notes. I
Yes.
think is really, really key. I mean, Shannon, you have shared some formidable tips. I know, really, really well thought out, and great nuggets that I think our viewers and myself, I'm there, taking notes as well. Uh, Thank you for sharing your story with such honesty and heart. I think it's really good to have a conversation with someone that, about what leadership is. It's about being collaborative, not about being loud, being clear, being kind, and willing to stand in the middle when it matters most with your storytelling as well. So, Shannon, where can people find you on all the socials? Let it rip.
Okay. Let's see. Most of my handles are at Shannon K Watson, SHANNON Watson, WATSON. Majority in the Middle is on the web. Majoritymiddle.org is our website. And then we've got, of course, all the socials that come with those. And then on LinkedIn, I'm Shannon K Watson on LinkedIn as well.
Perfect. Right. I'm going to try
Yeah.
some tech things here.
That's
Right,
awesome.
Shannon. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. To everyone who's been listening, this has been the Trailblazers Experience Podcast. You know where to find us. Follow, like, share, and tell another woman about the podcast. Until next time, bye.